Alright, kind of a by request video. Not that I do those too often, but yeah, I mean, I've spoken before, mentioned SDI, the Star Wars thing, the missile defense system stuff, and so I have gotten a couple of PMs asking for more information. I guess people don't really, it's not in the press much, you know. I mean, it's been going on for decades, and people don't really know the details, so I'll just make a simple details, not big details, little details kind of video. Alright, so anyway, the idea is that go back to the Reagan decade. They came up with this idea, this excuse to spend more money on the military, you know, because they really wanted to increase the military budget. But we had a ton of hardware, we had a ton of stuff, and we had space shuttles, and we had all kinds of stuff, and so they had to come up with something. They had to come up with some new excuse, some new vulnerability. So they decided to go with this defense shield stuff, like somehow they're going to defend us against missiles. And you know, so they started spending $7 billion a year, and now it's over 10, between 10 and 15, because we're now spending the money in Europe. You know, we're building the first whatever shield element in Poland, and so anyway, the idea is that they want to shoot down these ballistic missiles, not the cruise missiles, not the, you know, this isn't that, you know, whatever Patriot kind of system. This is intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, the really big ones, the ones that Russia has and we have and China has, that can go long range from continent to continent. So anyway, they shoot up into space and then they fall down on their target. That's basically how they work. They use all their power just to get to space, then they drift through space, and then they just fall down on their target. So there's lots of places to nail them, because it takes 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes for them to get where they're going. Well, anyway, so, you know, the whole thing in theory is just nonsense, and the CIA has testified so before Congress and basically explained that there's no way you could win this technology game, because as soon as you create a shield, you'll create all kinds of incentives to make the missiles themselves more malicious. To overcome whatever obstacle you put to their effectiveness, and that there's really no way this will just accelerate another technology race, and it really is, that's just the truth of it. It's just a waste of money. It will gain no security for it whatsoever. The technology isn't, you know, we might not even get tang out of it for the billions and billions spent. And it's really just money for defense contractors. All the Raytheons and the Boeings and whatever, they all get rich on this free money. So anyway, it's just, so you should understand that the ballistic missile is the most secure deployment of a nuclear bomb, because nobody can launch one without us knowing where it came from. We can see the launches. It takes a big giant explosion for them to take off. A lot of heat's generated, and our satellites can detect it really easily. So we know who sent it, kind of thing. All right, there's a return address on every nuke that way. And all we're doing is encouraging countries like China or Russia to take their nuclear warheads and put them on cruise missiles, which can be deployed from an airplane or from submarines, and also from land if you have a close enough border. And cruise missiles, that technology has been increasing and increasing, and you know, they can now fly, you know, basically, theoretically, they could open your front door and fly out your back door. I mean, they can fly a matter of feet off the ground. They can navigate all kinds of terrain, so they can't really be detected by radars. And even if you did detect them, they're fast and evasive. They have all kinds of pre-programming when they're heading for a target, evasive maneuvers. So, I mean, it's just, they're really going to be hard to ever come up with technology to hit that. That really is hitting a bullet with a bullet, and it's, you know, that isn't going to happen. And let's say theoretically, even if it could happen, it still isn't going to, it isn't going to eliminate any threats. A nuclear warhead theoretically could become a suitcase kind of weapon, and that suitcase could be put in a cargo ship full of Cheerios, you know, and sent to New York Harbor and exploded with a cell phone, and boom. I mean, there's so many ways that they can be deployed, and the last thing you want to do is encourage companies to be too strategic in how they're thinking about those deployments. You don't want them to go there. And as soon as you threaten intercontinental ballistic missiles, you give them a rationale to go there. It's really stupid. If anything, you want to encourage every country to put every nuclear warhead on an intercontinental ballistic missile. You want them to put them on accountable missiles that can't be used effectively as any kind of first strike or terrorist strike weapon. And we're doing exactly the opposite, which is really, really stupid. And we're spending a huge amount of money. Like I said, this is every year, over $10 billion every year. So we've spent, hundreds of billions now, and we're essentially getting ourselves to the edge of a cliff where we'll have to spend maybe trillions more, just because if we encourage other countries to do the same thing and compromise the effectiveness of any retaliation force we might have, then we'll end up having to do the same thing and redeploy our missiles. Although we have so many on submarines and in airplanes now that I really don't see that as a threat. But the whole thing is just so idiotic, and it just demonstrates just how broken our government is. Because if this subject was really explored in the public, debated thoroughly, there's no way people couldn't understand that it really isn't in our interest to play with this technology. Let's stick with something secure. Let's come up with treaties to guarantee that security. And like I said, the last thing you want to do is have countries thinking about, well, let's just sink a couple of our nukes off their coast, and that way we can blow them up anytime we want to, and crap like that. I mean, putting nuclear warheads in risky positions is not what you want to encourage. We want to get them out of submarines. We want to get them off of airplanes. It's not in our security interest to have nuclear warheads flying over our heads. It just isn't. Landing and taking off every day. Really dumb. And but again, like I said, just shows how corrupt the government is, how these two parties have thoroughly screwed any honesty. I mean, they don't care about honest policy. It's all a game. It's all engineered to get enough jobs to their district and to get enough, it's all this pork kind of perspective. That's why this whole geographic voting district thing is a failure. We've got to get rid of it. Because we've got to get rid of people doing things for reasons that have nothing to do with the national interest. If you're going to be in the Congress, your first interest has to be the nation, not your state, not your region. And we have to give people the capacity to vote and actually win elections where they can vote outside of their special interest, because they're not nailed to a voting district that is going to be owned by the majority business in that district, which too often is a military base. And that's where we've given these special interests of teachers unions and public service unions, public employment unions, whatever you want to call government unions, in the military, the medical industrial complex, also through Medicare and Medicaid, just way too much power. I mean, they basically run our government, these special interests. And we got to fix the system. I mean, we have a democracy, but it is broken. And there's no point in these jerks, who will just sit there and say, democracy doesn't work because it's not working today. And then go 180 degrees in some opposite direction towards some pie-in-the-sky notion of ultimate and absolute freedom or anarchy or some other crap that just it won't fix any of these problems. It just eliminates the obligation to fix them. It just says, well, let's just go back to some system where might will make right, period, and we'll only have nature to blame, or human psychology to blame, and we won't have any obligation to call it a system. So we can't blame the system anymore. And it's just bullshit. That's not going to be a better world. So anyway, it is an important subject just for how it demonstrates. It's just a perfect example of the fact that we have national policy that isn't intended to do anything for the United States of America. Nothing productive for the people who live here. It's just a horrible waste of money. And it's a destruction of our own self-interest. So anyway, enough on this subject, I think.